Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to break down what I think are the top 8 decks which could be used for competitive play for this month. Something I want to start doing at least start of every month to showcase what I think are the decks which could really perform well in the upcoming regionals that even happen in a few days' time, or the cups and challenges which I've really started to bring back, which I'm loving to see the scene about. You guys seem to really love my breakdown for the top decks of the format, so I just want to try and keep up to date with these to do at least once a month. So let's jump into my number 8 spot, Miraidon EX. The deck which I was really hyped about, the one which I put so much testing in fact is performing a lot bit flat. Did do well at EUIC by getting 1 top 8 placements, but if we look at Limitless's win rate is very low by being only 44%. I think it's one of the lowest which I'm going to show you, which isn't very strong. When we even think of its matchup wise, across the board, especially some Lost Box decks, you're really not performing as strong as you thought about, and your only positive matchup is itself. Does have a decent meta share online by being about 7.6%. Yes, that is a little bit of a low number, but it doesn't have to be super high to really be worried about, where it's nearly about 10% of the time, that's 1 in 10 chances you might potentially face this list. So always something to be wary about, especially this archetype. But the reason I put it a bit further down is because yes, its tandem unit ability is super strong, but Photon Blaster just can't constantly continually to attack a lot higher up. That's why you have to go to other attackers like Raikou, and also Magnezone. So you really struggle with that, and relying on VMAXs, which aren't going to be used as attacking, are definitely something to kind of think about because they could be really big liabilities later on in the game. So a rough list, which I've been really playing around with, similar to what it is in the top 8 that plays well, is this sort of archetype here. Playing a higher count of Raikou V, because you want to have a consistent other attacker. I love the Cramomatic. I think that's absolutely amazing, and utilizing with Arvin as well. You can always get the Pokemon you might potentially want to have. An Echoing Horn and Escape Rope really helps you get around Lowland Vulpix. Yes, it might have been that one and done sort of archetype, but it's been nearly a few weeks since we've had a regionals, and Lowland Vulpix is doing pretty well. And even in Japan, we're seeing these increase of these wall style decks. So always having an answer to that is also very, very powerful. Playing the escape ropes and higher counts of EXP share is very much strong. Just a good bulk standard list to really consider about for your Miraidon. And if you're ever worried about sort of decks like Lost Box or the Gardevoir list, Magnezone V-Star is a really good attack to bring up the mana fee with its first attack, and then V-Star to get that KO on the potential 2-bench Pokemon. If you're worried about potentially some Mew Giratinas or maybe Arceus, and you don't want to put down too many Regieleki VMAXs because they're very expensive, Choice Belt is a very good option to play around with that one. There's basically a Regieleki VMAX, and those are the only Pokemon which you should really be playing Choice Belt for, unless you want to play a Gardevoir, then you'll play that those glove sort of cards. And then Klefki is very good again, Mew matchup, or potentially even the Mirror as well as Lost Box to have around, but people are more focusing on Magnezone. But Klefki is still a good answer. Now, my number 7 spot does go to Arceus Giratina. This list is definitely performing a lot better than I thought it would do. EUIC, not particularly as strong, only got 2 top 32 placements. But if we look at online, the last 4 weeks, it's won quite a few of these big tournaments. It's won 6 of them, and its win rate is 52%. Always a positive matchup is very, very strong, especially with a very powerful deck. Arceus has an amazing ability to set up, and it's incredibly strong attack to really power up their Pokemon with Giratina and V-Star. Nearly KOing every single Pokemon on the board is really, really good. And if we look at its matchups right now on Trainer Hill, it's very, very positive. The only negative one you do have is Mew, Lost Zard, and Lugia. That's something you should really consider about. If those are your only bad matchups, Lost Zard is definitely becoming a lot more popular. Lugia, you already kind of can struggle with because they can get the one-hit KOs and hit for weakness, and they're using 2 prizes. It's definitely something to be scared about. And Mew, again, you can go around it if you are scared about Mew. You can always play the Drapion or potentially even the Moltres. So there are some options around it. And this is the list that in fact get the top 32 placement at EUIC. Very, very, very strong sort of list. It does play the Suave and the Bibarel engine, something which we've seen a big increase in right-hand play. And everything else is very similar. We're playing the 1 count of Raihan and Terran's Care, which I like for the healing and energy acceleration, and the 4 path for the peak to really limit the opponent. And you want to try and get that star buff in early so he doesn't get affected by it. Whereas Raihan does kind of go around it being a pseudo star buff if you do get past the peak lock and someone gets knocked out. Definitely something which I really, really enjoy. And some of the options you could potentially think about text are going back to the Flying Pikachu. You play a small account of the Arceus and some of the energies, go to Flying Pikachu if you're worried about Lost Zone or potentially even the Miraidons around. Flying Pikachu is definitely a good answer to really stop those basic Pokemon. And Radiant Gardevoir to get that extra bump of a HP, doing 20 less with V-Guard energy as well. 50 less from V Pokemon, you're all of a sudden having these big 330 HP V stars, which can be very, very strong and very difficult for potentially options like Mew and also Gardevoir to deal with. So my number 6 spot is in fact Mew. The reason I put Mew a little bit further down is, yes, it is performing okay. It has a decent win rate and has an okay meta share, but I think it's not performing as strongly as I would have hoped for. It did really, really well in Japan. Yes, it nearly did get into the finals at EOIC by getting the top 4. So I do think it's in an okay-ish position and it has a pretty positive matchups overall, but it does struggle against the 2 big main Lost Zone decks. Against a Lost Zone box as well as Zard, it's something which is really, really struggling with. Because they can, yes, play Drapion, and even like recycling that with getting some of the energies on it, any of the Pokemon on the side, that's something to really be scared about as well. It has a very good win rate, has a really decent matchup against Miraidon, Lugia, Gardevoir, and even itself as well as Arceus and Goodra. Those are something which I really like about, but because of Lost Zone, it isn't getting the numbers right now. Even in Japan, it's starting to fall off a little bit as well. So Mew maybe right now is in a good spot, but doesn't mean it's in a bad spot at all. It doesn't mean we shouldn't stop playing with it. You can still play in cups. You're still going to perform really, really well. But some of its bad matchups aren't just as strong. And the feel for me right now isn't as much as better as it should be. This is, in fact, Pablo's top 4 list. I think it's incredibly strong, incredibly powerful. I do like the fan of ways, the Echoing Horn. There are ways around any of the locks, which might be around. But I think right now, Mew maybe take a little bit of back burner. It can sit out for a set or two, but always come back. Because Mew is just one of these cards which always is going to get better with some of the cards it gets. Yes, Spiritomb may hurt it in the future, but Mew right now, I would say, is in a good spot, but not as performing as well. So maybe put it on the back burner just for now. And there's some options which you could potentially go with. If you're worried about Gardevoir, Cleansing Gloves is a really, really good one because then you get extra KO on that Gardevoir because it does have a very high HP. And you could even go back to the Fusion Build one. That one I did play for Pedro was in fact the Path of Peak Lock one, which is a really, really powerful archetype. But if you're worried about not doing enough damage, the Fusion Build is always there for you. They're both equally about the same, but I would say the Path of Peak build is much stronger. So potentially park that for now. Maybe you can try out the Fusion build if you're always a Mew diehard. Now, my number 5 spot does actually go to Lost Zone Zard. This is a list which definitely was really, really powerful at the start of it, but when it came to Silver Tempest, disappeared for quite a while. Sable Zard didn't become as strong as it once did. Now it's really on the rise, but it's performing pretty well. It's about 4% of the meta share, really good win rate. It only got 1 top 4 placement at EOIC. It's the only thing in the top 32, so it did okay. And it has a positive board state on nearly everything except Goodra, because Goodra can get 1-hit KOs and everything, wall 80 damage. You're not really going to get that big 1-hit KO because Charizard can poke it, but then they can get healed, they can switch to another one. So Goodra becomes a bit of a threat, really a bit of a struggle by constantly trying to chain your Charizards. So definitely something to be considered about. Whereas your Lost Box matchups is a 50-50 on nearly every single one. And I always say that of Lost Zone. Pretty much you have to play it perfectly sometimes to get the KO. If you constantly have to be trading, but if you're not trading, you want to set up to get that double KO with Sableye or potentially Greninja. But with this one, it will be Sableye. The rest of the matchup's pretty, really good. Miraidon, you can get the 1-hit KOs and everything. Same thing with Arceus Giratina, as well as Lugia. Roger that. And with Gardevoir, potentially even get some KOs with Drapion if they have enough sort of energies built up, you can. This is a list that did in fact get the Pedro was played at a cup and did a couple cuts from this EUIC top 4 placement. And I really, really like this list. The Choice Belt makes the Charizard hit for 280 damage. Very, very strong. The Pidgeots you can never deck out. This is something which I never thought about, but makes so much sense in this list. Marwile, I still think is very much a big threat. Because everyone is still only just catching up to it, playing a lot more switching cards, potentially building 1 or 2 turns with Marwile is something which is really, really good. It can really hinder the opponent. Pokegear, so you're never whiffing that chorus experiment. And the other one of supporters, I love Raihan. I think Raihan is one of my favorite supporters ever printed. So any option to play this list in the card is very, very strong. And Magma Basement can make sure you're always attacking Brilliant Charizard as quick as possible. Very, very lovely list. I think this is definitely something to be testing about. Really, really rising right now. So definitely, if you're enjoying Lost Box and you want a bit of a change from the Greninja build, try out the Charizard. Charizard's a lot cheaper than it once was when I bought it at the start of the year. So definitely something to join on that hype train. And you could even go with some tech option. You could play level, so you're always getting potentially the Comfies out. Miltank is very good to get that extra walling pressure. kind of build yourself a turn. And cross switches, if you don't have boss, cross switch is really good. You get that switching out and you get that gusting effect. Very, very powerful archetypes for some good tech matchups if you'll need them. My number 4 spot does in fact go to Lost Zone Goodra. This is a list which really kind of came EUIC by storm. Did in fact do pretty well by being 4 top 32 placements as well as 1 top 8 and 1 top 16. I think this is a list which definitely surprised us by how good it was, having a positive win rate. And if you just look at the past wins in the last 4 weeks, it is on a high roll right now, quite literally, being 9 of them, which is one of the most I've ever seen right now, and a decent meta share, but it's constantly going up and up and up as the weeks have gone around. Matchup wise, pretty powerful. Mew and Arceus are actually one of its worst matchups. Mew, because it can get around that rolling line effect, it does play quite a few switching outs, as well as getting that big one-hit KO with stuff like power tablets and even having choice belt attached to it. And having Arceus as well, because Giratina could potentially get the big one-hit KOs onto it. So that's something a bit of a struggle with, because if they get set up, I always think Arceus is in a much stronger position. But if Goodra does get in a much more stronger start at the start, I think Goodra is in a much better one overall. It's in a very, very good powerful one, especially with that Moisture Trial ability to get that extra healing in. And this is a list that did in fact get top 8. I think it's a really, really powerful one. Having the Crystal Cave to get extra healing on, playing the Melanie to get that Goodra powered up as quickly as possible, and the double Drapion, because Drapion doesn't just help in your Mew matchup, it also helps in your Gardevoir because you're playing Mirage Gate and even having Melanie. So this can make sure you can even get a Drapion KO on a Gardevoir as early as turn 2, as long as you have the right amount of cards in the Lost Zone. I do like every single thing about this list. I do love the Pokegear. Again, like I said earlier, it's a way for you always to get the Chorus Experiment out as quickly as possible. And the energy count is a decent amount of split. You need to have potentially more water energies if you want to attack with Greninja. That's why you play 6 of them instead of 5. If you're, again, like you enjoy Lost Zone and you have a couple Goodras out, definitely kind of pick these up. It's incredibly powerful, strong right now, especially with that Roaring Eye ability. There's not as much switching outs right now, so people can you could trap something in the active spot with your 3 copies of Boss and 4 copies of Escape Rope. You want to be disruptive, and that's why I think this list can really perform, because nothing can hit those big one-hit KOs unless they are in fact Gardevoir. Some techs you could play, similar like with Melanie, Raihan is really good to get that potentially that metal energy you might want to have in there. Temple of Sinnoh, if you're really scared about Mew, if you're really scared about Lugia, you can get that immediately stopping out. And even the Vigar, which is in the Arceus list, it's really good to stop that over. And if you have space for another one-off attacker, Articuno isn't too bad. With that Wild Freeze attack, we can do 70 damage. And like I said, not many people are switching. Getting your opponent's Pokemon paralyzed, kind of saving yourself at least one turn, is really, really strong in this sort of list. You can even add like Emergency Jelly if possible. So what is my number 3 spot? Yes, you guessed it, it's Lugia Single Strike. Lugia may not be the top dog right now, but it's performing incredibly well. Got 2 of the top 8 placements right now in EUIC. Its meta share is nearly 10%, so it's in a very, very positive way. You're always going to kind of face against it. Win rate being over 50%, and its placement winning is over 7, which is very, very good for these huge tournaments that Lugia is performing very well online and getting the results as well at EUIC. The amazing Summoning Star ability, Tempest Dive as well, doing a pretty decent amount of damage, but Summoning Star getting out the Arceus out at turn 2 is super, super strong. Yes, it may not be at its power where it once was a couple seasons ago, but it is still so strong, getting that potentially 320 damage done with Tyranitar. Again, the matchup row is pretty good overall. It does have a pretty bad Lost Zone Goodra matchup, because Goodra can get that healing. You're not getting that big one-hit KO. You can try that one-hit KO, they get the healing, and then if they have a choice belt on, they can immediately return that KO on that Tyranitar, something which this list can't really deal with. Mew as well, Mew can kind of do Mew things that can immediately get the big one-hit KO response from what they can get, even if you do hit for weakness. Same thing with Gardevoir and Lost Zone Zard. They can go around it, they can get the one-hit KO, and Gardevoir, along with Skysteel Stone, can get potentially 3 prizes from a Lugia V-Star. And the list I'm kind of went with is one of the placements in the top 4. I do think that Miraidon is something which we should always be considering to go with, because it even helps in their own mirror matchup, because of that Skyscraper ability, as well as it goes through everything doing 220 damage. So you're not scared about the likes of Alolan V-Star, Alolan Vulpix V-Star, or any of the Miltanks or any Wall Pokemon. You're immediately hitting through everything and really helpful in the mirror match. If your opponent doesn't play a Miraidon, it immediately swings your Lugia in much more favor. The only thing I dislike about this style list, we do play a smaller line of Lugia. With a lot more coin flips like Capturing Roma and potentially even Mesagoza, this list doesn't play huge outs to get the Lugia, Excite, Ultra Ball, and Capturing Aroma. Apart from everything else is very, very bog standard. The impact energy, because we're playing more single strike, we need to have more energies available to us because of Earn of Vitality. And the Lugia and the Evital is a very good one prizer to deal with the likes of Gardevoir as well as Mew. I really like Lugia right now in the matchup, and the only tech I would really add, which you could consider, is Mesagoza. You could obviously go with the Drapion package if you're worried about wanting to get that guaranteed KO, but because you're playing Tyranitar, because you're playing Evital, you do have those outs to it. So what is my number 2 spot? It does go to Gardevoir EX, a list which is shot right up my sort of in understanding and kind of thoughts of this list. I really didn't like Gardevoir at the start, but we can see right now its meta share is 10.8%, incredibly high for this really dominant card. It is a stage 2, and it's amazing to say that we're saying this. It's one of the second best decks is a stage 2. An okay win rate. The reason why win rates, I think, for the higher decks are much lower because more and more people are playing them. Some people pick up the list, play it, and then drop it out because they're really trying to understand the list. They're just probably picking up towards the list, then going with that one. But if we look at how many good wins it's had in the last 4 weeks, it's got up to 7. Very, very powerful, constantly getting these big wins. They may not seem that many, but for these big online tournaments, with having that many wins for it, it's very, very strong. And its matchup is pretty good overall. It does have a pretty bad Lost Zone sort of decks because the Lost Zone decks can really kind of abuse it, can really try and get the single, promote like single price Pokemon. Gardevoir might have to promote like their own sort of selves or even their Zacians, which can be a bit vulnerable to these to one single prize, which can immediately get an instant return or KO. Your Lugia matchup could be pretty good overall as well, even though they can hit you for weakness, because you can get their big power up early on. I think you're in a really good spot as well. But with decks like Arceus, they can overroll you because they could potentially get set up earlier. So I would definitely recommend playing towards list. Very, very powerful and consistent. It helps around all the sort of board state. I do like the other, like the Mirage Alley and Volts, because that can stop your opponent from using their Alolan Vulpix. That's definitely an archetype which has come out of nowhere from EUIC, but always is here to stay now. Everything about this list is absolutely perfect. Definitely something to really consider because Tord made an amazing consistent Gardevoir list and is constantly doing well and absolutely dominating on the ladder. The only techs you could potentially think of about playing would in fact be the Gallade from the Lost Origin or the Mewtwo V Union. Some people argue both of these are really good. Gallade is really good to get the support you might need and doing 160 damage. And Mewtwo V Union, yes, may change the deck quite a lot and deal a lot of damage on, but it is still very, very powerful with that ability to heal, but not being having damage counters put onto it and doing 16 damage counters everywhere on the board. And you guesses my number 1 spot is in fact Lost Zone Box, and more particularly the turbo version. The win rate being 50% nearly is incredibly good. Look at that win rate in the past 4 weeks. Sorry, it's 12, very, very high. And even its meta share is nearly 15%. That's over 1 in the 10 chance you've got to face it online. Matchup overall is a much more dominated spread because it's one of the most popular decks. Everyone knew how good it was, utilizing the amazing power of flower selecting. You do struggle with some decks like Arceus and Lugia and even Zone Goodra. Goodra makes a lot of sense. They can absolutely roll over you because it's incredibly powerful archetype and super, super strong. So you can really struggle with that instant healing that you might have. And Arceus Giratina, they have very, very high HP. If you're not playing like likes of Dragonite or even the likes of potentially Miraidon Charizard, you can't get that big one-hit KO. So that kind of focuses on to more of that. Similar thing with Lugia. This is in fact the turbo list, which has always been playing quite a lot and in fact did really well at EUIC, really focusing on trying to get that turn 1 attack with Dragonite V, dealing 250 damage, which is absolutely an insane amount of damage, getting out of to potentially get an instant KO on everything. Lost Vacuum really helps you power up your Lost Zone because you can get rid of the Forest Steel Stone or the Beach Court because you may not want your opponent to have access to that. Or if you've already used Forest Steel Stone, it's very good to get that out of the way and immediately fuel up your Lost Zone to get out Sableye or Mirage Gate as quickly as possible. This is incredibly powerful because it can use both single prizes and 2 prizes to get the KO. Raikou is just very, very powerful to 220 damage consistently if they have both of a full bench damage, and you're getting the KO on Lugia and it with Escape Rope Boss on Flying Pikachu, so you don't need to worry about that too much. And Dragonite V can do 250 damage, and then you can play around with Sableye damage later on with it. I think Lost Zone is definitely one of the strongest decks right now. Between Lost Zone and Gardevoir, I would definitely probably pick with Lost Zone deck, but if you don't want to have a headache too much, I would not want to play Lost Zone. And the only techs which you could potentially play are Choice Belts, so you can get that 280 damage very easily with your the Dragonite, and Sky Steel Stone if you want to potentially get 2 to 3 prizes. I think this is a really good archetype as well. You could go back to the Sky Steel Stone one and not focus too much on the Guardian to get the big turbo of what Dragonite has to offer. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been very insightful about what I think are the top 8 decks of the format. I think it's really exciting to see how much has evolved already, but Lost Zone right now is definitely the best deck for a very long time. You're going to be hearing me talk about that probably until next week, not next week, next month when we get the new cards then. Lost Zone is in a very, very dominant spot and it can't really be stopped because there aren't that many stuff to punish it. And Gardevoir, yes, maybe a stage 2, is still incredibly powerfully amazing Psychic Embrace to flood the board of energies and get those big one-hit KOs with Zacian or the Gardevoir. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what deck you want to try out. Do you think I missed anything from the list, or is there something here which you really want to play and kind of like understand about for your next regionals? My name is Charlie TCG, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Bye for now.